Hello, my name is Darren Thomas and I am the Director of Educational Research Techniques. In this video, we're going to take a look at several types of rubrics that you can use for writing to help and to support your students. So, we're going to look at three types of rubrics that are commonly used, especially the first two, in assessing writing. The first one is a holistic rubric, the second one is an analytical rubric, and the last one, not as commonly used, is a primary trait rubric. So, a holistic rubric kind of allows you to assess the writing from an overall broad, big picture sort of view. So often when you have a holistic rubric, you might have several different levels of which the student has achieved based on the descriptors. Now this is kind of theoretical right now, so on the next slide, you can see a specific example of a holistic rubric. So on this one, you can see we have four different levels: needs work, satisfactory, good, and excellent. And then we have a description of what the student needs to do to achieve a specific level. So, for example, to get excellent, which is between 90 and 100, the descriptors are: the ideals are thoroughly explained, the writing is highly coherent, and there are almost no grammatical errors. So this is what the student needs to do to achieve an excellent. Now, one of the primary benefits of holistic marking or holistic rubrics is fast marking. You are able to quickly assess large amounts of students' essays and students' writing, etc. in a short amount of time, because it doesn't take a lot of effort to complete the rubric and to give an idea of how the student is doing. Also, these rubrics are very easy to interpret, and because of their simplicity, they're actually considered to be highly reliable. This might seem counterintuitive because they're so subjective. But actually, because you have these broad categories, which, if you're familiar with statistics, we like to call them bins, it's very easy for people to agree on a student's quality of writing. However, one of the concerns with holistic rubrics is the lack of the strong feedback. Because the rubric is so vague, the student doesn't exactly know how they can improve their writing and what they need to do. So often, this type of a rubric is used for summative end of semester type of assessment, when you're not really trying to get feedback, but you're trying to record the final progress that a student has made throughout the course of a semester. However, before that, you need to work on something that has more formative assessment, and that would be in particular the analytical rubric, which we will look at next. So this is the analytical rubric. It is a rubric that scores on individual traits. So you can see here that I have my descriptors off to the side, but now for each descriptor, there are several levels of how the student is doing, from best performance to worst. Now, whether it's left to right or right to left doesn't really matter. That's not the point. But with this is that you have traits, and then you have descriptions of competence to incompetence for achievement on that particular trait. So let's take a look at an example. So here is an analytical rubric that is filled out, and so the student is being graded on three different traits here: idea, explanation, coherency, and grammar. And to get excellence, this is what they have to do with their ability to explain ideas. For coherency, this is what they have to do, etc. And for grammar, etc. And so you can see here, as we go from left to right, the scores go down. They go from excellent to needs improvement. And inside each box, the student gets an idea of how well they were doing. So, as you can see here, the analytical rubric allows for better feedback. The student gets a greater sense of how they're doing, not just in general, but on specific traits. But also the downside is that analytical rubrics are often much slower to complete for the teacher. You can imagine having 30 essays and having to fill out, 3 different levels on each rubric. That's 90 times that you have to fill something out, in addition to the time you have to spend reading, etc. So generally, analytical rubrics take much more time, but for the average teacher, they're also much more common and much more popular than the holistic rubric. So which one you use depends. Again, I recommend holistic rubrics for summative, end of semester type assessments when you don't really need to provide feedback. You just want to get it done so you can submit grades. Analytical rubrics, on the other hand, are great to be used throughout the semester to help the student to get an idea of how they can improve and what they need to do. The last one, and this is not as commonly used, is called a primary trait. And this is where you assess one skill or one aspect of a paper. And so you might focus on, for example, persuasion or you might focus only on the use of vocabulary or grammar, whatever. And so what you do is that you have a holistic rubric, but with only one descriptive trait. Now, so as an example here, notice how here I have the 4 levels, but off of the descriptors, I have several descriptors at each level. With the primary trait, you will not have several things separated by a comma. Instead, you only have one trait there. Now, the advantage of this is that it allows students to focus. So if you as a teacher notice that all the students are struggling with vocabulary use, you might have them write an essay where you are only focused on how they use vocabulary words in that particular context. The students don't have to worry about other things. They can build up that one weakness, and then you can have them do a more generalized essay in the future or for some other writing assignment. So there are times for all of these. I wouldn't recommend primary trait for a summative type assessment, because normally you want to kind of see how they master several skills at once when you do a summative type assessment. So having said that, in this particular video, we looked at several different types of rubrics here. We took a look at holistic rubrics, which provide a big picture in terms of progress. They don't give a lot of details and they don't provide a lot of feedback for students, but they have speed. We also looked at analytical rubrics. They provide much more feedback, but however, for the teacher, it slows them down and is also much more cumbersome to execute. And lastly, we looked at primary trait, which is kind of like a holistic rubric, except you don't have several descriptors, you have one. And this allows students to build and strengthen specific weaknesses that you as a teacher have identified prior to the actual assessment. So we hope that this video was useful for you, and we want to thank you for watching. My name is Darren Thomas, and I am the Director of Educational Research Techniques. Take care.